Kia ora and welcome back to the Happy Saver podcast. I'm Ruth, a personal finance blogger here in Aotearoa. Now, have you ever wondered about other people and their money? Well, I certainly did. So for this podcast, I go out and I interview them. Now, everyone is different. Every journey with money is different. But what remains the same is that everyday people generously explain how they handle their money in New Zealand. Now, just so you know what you are in for, you won't hear them speaking directly. Kiwis are coy about their money and often prefer to remain anonymous, but it doesn't mean that they don't want to share their personal finance story. So I interview them and then I retell their experiences in this podcast. Today's guest, Tracey, has been reading and listening to The Happy Saver almost since the beginning, but she first came on my radar when she filled out my Debt Free Questionnaire back in 2022. I created this as an opportunity for people to share their getting out of debt success stories with others, and her responses showed a high level of complexity to her finances that she elaborated on during our kōrero for this podcast episode. Today, Tracey and her husband, who didn't want to speak for this episode and would love to stay anonymous, are what is known as Coast Fi. Now, this means that they already have enough money invested that, even if they never added another dollar to their investments, by the time they reach 65, it will have grown to their required retirement amount. Now that technically they no longer need to make the money to add to their investments, well, this gives them the opportunity to scale back the amount of hours that they work in their self-employed HR jobs, if they chose to. Today I'm going to talk about how Tracey got herself to this point and where she plans to take it from here. It's an interesting episode with quite a bit of complexity, but I think it's a fascinating one as this couple have independently and collectively created a lot of options for themselves. Tracey said that she has had a lumpy journey and she said there is no need to go anywhere in a straight line, but the key for her is that she is making progress. And she is a firm believer in setting up an investment, making regular contributions to it, but not being afraid to make changes and do things differently as you continue to research and learn new information. Now, I often worry my episodes are getting a bit long, but so many people tell me that they like the length because they head out for exercise while they listen. So, put on your running or walking shoes, put the dog on a lead, and let's go. And before we really jump into it, let's have a quick message from today's sponsor. PocketSmith has many uses, and this one is close to my heart. As a blogger and podcaster, I manage my small business using it. You might manage a trust, rental income, or selling products. PocketSmith can easily do it all. Throughout the month, I categorise each financial move my business makes, and at the end of the tax year, PocketSmith consolidates all my financial transactions and assets into an organised, exportable format that I can share with my accountant. The more efficiently I can provide my financials to them, the faster they can complete my return, saving time and money and reducing errors. And let's not forget the biggest reason I'm a fan of this software, it lets me know exactly how my business is performing. If you want to supercharge your finances with PocketSmith, have we got a deal for you? Happy Saver listeners get a whopping 50% off your first 2 months of PocketSmith's foundation plan. To get your deal, go to pocketsmith.com/The Happy Saver. That's pocketsmith.com/The Happy Saver. Both Tracey and her husband grew up in the lower North Island, Te Ika a Maui. While they have moved to a few different towns in the lower north, it's a place that they love, so they remain there today. Tracey is currently 49 and her husband is 53, and they've been together 10 years. And it was just Tracey and I who picked up the phone for a good old kōrero in March of 2025. Given they have a mix of individual and joint finances, we've more or less focused on just Tracey today. I've had the opportunity to actually meet Tracey in person a few times now, when she called in to say hello when she was passing through my town, Alexandra, and also we got the chance to hang out at the Personal Finance Weekend Black Friday in November last year. She's a woman very comfortable with discussing money, and she said that in regards to money, it's her life, so she gets to decide what risks she is comfortable taking with it. Tracey grew up with an older sister and a younger brother and sister, and I asked her if she had a sense of money while growing up. Well, growing up back in the 1980s, she thought they were probably financially average. It seemed to her that money was tight for everyone then, but once a year her parents might treat them to a dinner at Cobb & Co, or fish and chips, and a real treat was having a Just Juice instead of a Raro. There was one event she did vaguely recollect though, and that was her parents losing money when they were invested in Briley shares, and they, along with many, many other New Zealanders, lost their entire investment in the late 1980s. Her parents separated when she was 12 years old, and then she does recall that money got really tight, with her mother being paid the domestic purposes benefit and her father paying some child support. And she recalled the humiliation she felt at the end of the school year when, in order to receive the school end-of-year magazine, you had to have paid your school fees. They simply could not afford to, so as each child was called up to the stage to collect it, Tracey stayed seated, and she has never forgotten how being singled out like that felt. Now, this came on top of her missing out on countless extracurricular activities throughout the year because each of them cost money, and money was tight at home and she knew it. And she remembers never asking her mum for money to go to these events. Instead, she just absorbed this feeling of being left out, all on her own. Now, I would like to think that schools have become a whole lot better at realising when there is financial stress at home and creating opportunities for children to be included. And today, Tracey regularly volunteers her time and her skills in HR to give back to her community, particularly with acts of service to support young people. She said that she and all her siblings feel a sense of service to their community, something that comes from their upbringing. She considered herself to be a good school student who could have done better, but she never really realised just how bright she was, so she just went with the flow. At 13, she picked up a local paper round, and from the start, her mum encouraged her to save a portion of her income for a rainy day. Not that this meant much to a young teen. She also encouraged her to save up to buy things, which she did, cash flowing her own first bike, a sewing machine that she barely used, and, showing her age, an electric typewriter. As she got older, she picked up babysitting and pet sitting for a bit of extra income. But it was in 1993, at the age of just 17, that she got her first adult job when she joined the army straight out of school, having learned about the army because the day the recruiters visited school, those who attended got to skip math, and that was something she was all for. It was around the time of the Gulf War, and military service was about helping people less fortunate than she was at 17. So even though she didn't know a single person currently serving in the military, she signed up as an administrator. And being so young, she was on the lowest wage they offered, but it went up slightly once she graduated. She was doing Office and Human Resources Administration, and it was her first taste of having a career in HR. And always a saver, when she first started with the army, her saving continued. She said that she had a sergeant who told her intake that superannuation is available, and although it is optional, he told them point blank that they had to join. Otherwise, he would show them the door. And I think that every workplace needs a person like this. Tracey contributed 7%, and they matched it with an additional 7%. So her sergeant was correct. It was a good scheme. She served for 4.5 years in Waiouru, Trentham and then Dunedin, but never managed to leave Aotearoa during that time because women never did back then. Times have now moved on, thank goodness, but she left the army because she was frustrated and just a bit bored with the role, and when she finished up, she went overseas to travel and work for a year. When she left the army in 1997, her superannuation balance was $10,000, which is a sizable sum at the time, given her low wage, but because they matched 7% and it was a share market investment, the balance grew quickly. And when she left, this was paid out to her, and without the knowledge or ability to roll this into some other type of superannuation scheme, she used some of it to pay for her flights and some of it to travel. But given she worked while she was away, she still had the bulk of it intact when she returned to Wellington, settled into a flat with some army friends, and began to work. She did a few admin jobs before she landed with Maritime New Zealand, and it was there that a female colleague pointed out that, quote, she had a brain in her head and she should be using it. It was the first time someone had told her that she was intelligent, Tracey said, and this colleague linked her up with a friend who worked in HR, and they encouraged Tracey that getting a tertiary education would be advantageous if she wanted to pursue HR as a career. She looked into all her options at Victoria University in Wellington, and in 2001 she started with one paper per semester while also working her full-time job. Now, unfortunately for Tracey, her time in the army left her with some occupational overuse physical injuries, and full-time work and study was taking its toll. So she spoke with her employer, who wanted to retain her, but she also spoke to her doctor, and ultimately she made the call to go full-time at university instead. She had again been contributing to her work superannuation scheme, and just like she did last time, she cashed out another $10,000, and she kept this aside as a cash buffer. Because she was now over the age of 25, she was eligible for a student allowance, plus she received some disability support to help her with note-taking, given writing was difficult. Plus her father stepped in and said that he would pay her phone bill, and her mother offered to pay her power bill. And Tracey also sold her car so that she had more cash to cover her bills. Now, parents often wonder how they can support their adult children when they see them in a period of life where, yes, they are adults, but they could also do with a little support. And this simple act of paying a specific expense for a year is a huge benefit to someone who is managing their money well, but just needs a little more of it. Tracey devoted herself to her study and her physiotherapy, and she lived within her means as best she could, using her student allowance to pay her daily expenses and only using a student loan to pay her fees. Plus, she thinks she might have taken $1,000 for course costs one year. And she actually used these for that purpose. She said she fortunately found herself in the first group not to have to pay interest from her first loan drawdown. Now, I was not so lucky. I paid 7% in interest from day one, which is why I am never blasé about student debt and why I actively paid mine off. Student debt used to incur interest, and there is nothing stopping the government charging interest again one day. While they remain interest-free in New Zealand for now, if you have moved overseas, the interest rate has now risen to 4.9%, and the late payment rate is now 8.9%. And you can go to the IRD website for more information on this. And if you have friends or whānau with loans and they are living overseas, please make sure that they know about these recent increases. Tracey said that when she was a student and went out with friends, she worked to a strict budget. If it came to the awkward, hey, just let's split the bill evenly for the entire table conversation, well, she stood her ground, explaining that she was a university student and they were all working by now, so she would only pay for what she had eaten, and sticking to her plans kept her costs low. In her third and final year, she began to tutor fellow students, which brought in extra income. Her student loan was $10,000 when she graduated at the age of 28 in 2003, with a Bachelor of Commerce and Administration with 2 majors. One major was management and the second major was human resource management and industrial relations. But the job market was tough when she graduated, and all she could get was an entry-level role working in the HR team at a government agency, which was a lesser role than before she went into university. She was paid just $30,000 a year, and interestingly, part of her role was working on the state sector retirement savings scheme, which as a state sector employee, she had also joined. But after 12 months, her career began to progress, and by the time she left 2 years later, in around 2005, she was slowly climbing, earning $38,000 annually. But it was while in that job that she actually bought her first home. Now, given she had not worked for the last couple of years and had to take out student loans, well, I wondered how she afforded to do this. In 2004, she bought a home in Wainuiomata for $113,000. It was a 2-bedroom house on a very busy main road in an undesirable location, a long way from her day job. But she could afford it. Her brother moved in with her, and the two of them continued to live together on and off for the next number of years. It was not her dream home by any stretch, but it was a perfect place to start. And she said that her biggest financial triumph is that she actually did something to progress her situation. Straight out of university, she didn't just moan that it's too hard to buy a house because she says, no, it's actually not. You just have to play the hand you are dealt and do something for yourself. Own your future with no excuses and know that it gets easier over time, she said. Buying this house was a stretch, but she knew that she could manage it. In 2005, she sold this house for $145,000 and she bought a house in Nainai, which is much closer to public transport, for $185,000. This was also the year that she paid off her student loan. The government had just removed interest from student loans, but Tracey had made a decision to actively pay it off, so she did. To make more money, to pay off her debt, she had continued her university tutoring for a few years after she finished uni, and plus she used some of her full-time income to make extra payments until it was all gone. In 2005, she went to work as an HR advisor in another government department, starting on $36,000 and moving up to $38,000 a year later. She said that rapid progression up the career ladder just wasn't a thing. It took time for your knowledge to grow, she said. But by 2007, she was earning $48,000. Now, using the Reserve Bank of New Zealand's inflation calculator, that would be almost $92,000 in today's money, so she was on her way. In 2007, 4 things happened for Tracey. Number 1, KiwiSaver was launched and she joined it on day 1. Number 2, she also sold her Nainai house privately for $235,000. Tracey has never hesitated to sell up and move if her housing needs changed. She was not in a hurry to sell, and she backed herself to do it privately, and it was an enjoyable experience for both her and the buyer, she said. Number 3, she purchased another house in Wellington for $265,000, which she rented out because the number 4 thing was that she also left her government job and she moved up to Auckland to work for one of New Zealand's largest grocery chains, staying until 2011. She left because she just couldn't learn to love Auckland, much preferring the Wellington region, where she returned to government roles and moved back into her house. And she kept moving around HR jobs, gathering up roles, knowledge and responsibilities, and her income kept stepping up bit by bit too. In 2011, she began using spreadsheets to create budgets and gather some data which she could then use to make future decisions. She has kept this habit up, and it's something that she loves doing. She's very familiar with it, and it gives her a real sense of comfort, knowing that she has a good overview of her pūtea. A standout money moment came in 2013 when she joined a company called Enable Me, who promised their clients that they would help you pay your mortgage off faster and get ahead. So she paid $4,000, which was a heck of a lot of money both then and now, to learn their special techniques. Well, they were never able to speed up her mortgage payoff because they looked at the financial plans and structure she had already created completely on her own, and they said that they couldn't create anything better. But they still took her money and they taught her how to refine her budgeting instead. Tracey realised that her spending had moved from being happy with the $10 leggings from the warehouse to buying the $100 leggings from Lululemon, and she was basically frittering her money away. So she taught herself to annualise her spending for a 12-month period and work out what it costs to run Tracey for an entire year. She can then use this information to forecast the years ahead. And in hindsight, she didn't get her money's worth from the advice she received, and she knows that today you can get the same information for free, but she did have a shift in mindset which challenged her spending and got her thinking more broadly about her money. The book Your Money or Your Life by Vicki Robin was also helpful in planning out the cost of her time and the future income and expenses. It enabled her to zoom out and look at the big picture of her life. In about 2014, she sold her home for not much more than what she'd paid, and she bought another house in the same area for just over $300,000. For her, she said, what with all the transaction and moving costs, plus the fact she bought and sold quite frequently, wealth doesn't come from property. She never made much money, and a house to her was a home, and when the home was no longer fit for purpose, she moved. She did continue to invest in retirement funds. Even if she was working for a government agency at the time and was able to contribute to a state sector retirement scheme, she still also always voluntarily paid into her KiwiSaver as well. Also, at all times, she lived below her means, always taking care to spend less than what she earned. Her salary continued to increase. She continued to pay into her retirement accounts, she tracked her expenses monthly, and worked out her annual expenses, meaning that she created a gap between income and expenses that she could then save. And with this money, Tracey started to use sinking funds to put money aside into her bank account for future expenses. These have been good lifelong habits that have helped her a lot. In 2015, at about the age of 40, she stumbled upon a couple called Our Tour UK, a couple who went travelling full-time, and that led her to Mr. Money Mustache, and both of these resources helped her realise that there are different and more interesting ways that she could spend her money and live a good life. Around that same time, she also met her husband, who also happened to work in HR, and she soon discovered that he also managed his money well. He did, and still does, lean more towards being frugal, and she likes to think that she helped him loosen up his spending a bit. Now, we didn't go into his finances at all, but the thing that did pop up a few times was that both earn well and are natural savers, but they both have a different attitude to risk and volatility when it comes to investing. Navigating their differences is an ever-evolving process and one that they both work on, so that each of them feels heard in their relationship, and I really liked this awareness of each other. Both had their own houses, and while hers had a mortgage, he owned his outright. Both had superannuation savings, cash in the bank, and each had a good income. Tracey made the decision to sell her home and move in with him, but given she had owned a home of her own for so long, she was not prepared to not own a house, so she bought into his. They created a relationship property agreement, which clearly laid out the percentage of the property that would become hers and his if they were to separate, and they both signed it. This home also had a unit attached to it that they could rent out. From this point on, they began to have some shared assets while maintaining some individual ones. They have a mix of shared and separate bank accounts too, to pay for joint and separate expenses, and savings for joint and separate upcoming expenses too. Then they eventually began to create some joint investment accounts together, as well as maintaining their own separate investment accounts. She said that share market investing together was done in baby steps, as they have different ideas about how they like to invest. It was hard to reach a common ground where both were happy with the level of risk and volatility of the investment, and it sounds like even today, this is something they are working on still. Again, I like how they continue to respect each other here, and one doesn't try to override the other. Instead, each compromise. Now, as I was creating this episode, it was very difficult to eloquently explain a complicated financial situation, particularly given it changes quite frequently. All that to say, they seem okay with what they've created, and that is really all that matters. When people come together later in life and with significant assets, I think that most will always feel the need to in some way protect what is theirs, plus maintain a level of independence. It does add complexity though. Tracey began to set herself some audacious goals, and one year, in about 2017-2018, she said she went all in and invested 73% of her income. She kept this up for a few years in a row, and as a result, her net worth had a massive increase, she said. And I like it when a saver discovers investing because, as Tracey pointed out, invested money is like having a whole heap of willing employees head off to work for you. But what was she invested in? Well, all sorts of things. Over the years, she has been a bit of a magpie when it comes to investing, and anything new and shiny got her attention. And given she was actively looking to educate herself about investing, it's safe to say that a lot of investments grabbed her attention. Both her and her husband were in separate share clubs for a time, but at the same time she read a variety of blogs and learned the impact of fees on investments, and the risk of investing in individual companies, and the risks of active management. She learned about the growth that could come from high-growth funds and passive ETF or index fund investments, such as a Total World or a US 500 fund. And much like moving houses, she said that she was never afraid to cash up and move her investments somewhere else, which is why, when we spoke, it was quite difficult to create a timeline of what she invested in and when. In 2016, they both thought that they should be investing in property, given the love affair Kiwis seem to have with it. So they bought a house in Palmerston North, a university town, which she said turned out to be a horrific investment. Renting to young people who had just moved out of home was more trouble than it was worth, with endless phone calls to deal with issues. Plus, they had to deal with a lot of aggression from their very anti-landlord tenants. Their intention was to provide a nice home for students in exchange for rent, but instead they got pushed back at every turn, she said. So now with 3 properties together, and that is their home, the flat connected to their home plus the student rental, in 2016, they thought they needed to take some financial advice on board to see if they couldn't understand investing in rental properties better. Now, many times over the years, they have sought external advice to grow their knowledge and create an investment that suits them both. And they saw an advertisement about a coaching program to help them invest in property. Now, they were adamant that they were going to attend the Wealth Mentor seminar, listen and absorb the information, but not buy the $40,000 coaching program being spruiked to them. Well, they then proceeded to buy the $40,000 coaching program that was spruiked to them. They very, very quickly worked out that what was being suggested was extremely actively managed, all about property, and would involve them taking on a ton of debt. They quickly realised that the way Tracey and her husband wanted to invest in property was not compatible with the way this company preached, so it was absolutely not for them. And it was while trying to implement the teachings of their program that the tension started in their relationship. For the first time, they found themselves arguing about their properties, while on the other side of her spreadsheet, her share market investments were just ticking over with little upkeep and absolutely no tension. The tension left the second they left the so-called mentor program and they kissed their money goodbye. Now, I am so skeptical about all these mentorship programs and online courses that will teach you to invest in property, shares, or any other asset class. Selling courses and mentorship is big business, and it's rare for me to hear any good feedback on any, including the ones mentioned here. Now, hear me when I say that everything you need to learn about money, you can learn for free via books, blogs, podcasts, and websites. You will hear good resources constantly mentioned via those I interview for my podcast. But what you also have to commit to is putting in the effort to learn. So twice now, Tracey sought expert help, and twice the outcomes were disappointing. Both of them work in HR, and in 2017 and 2018, they both became self-employed, and they began working together in their own business. Now, this gave them the freedom to work from anywhere. So, in 2018, they bought a lifestyle property for just over $500,000 over the Rimataka Hill, north of Wellington. They rented out their house, plus they had the flat attached that was already rented. They still own this property, and it still has a small mortgage on it today. And at this time, they also still had the student rental. They were still looking for a financial roadmap, though. They still think differently about money, and they wanted some help in creating a shared future that would bring their two money personalities together. And in 2019, they finally tracked down some decent help in the form of an independent, fixed-fee, advice-only financial planner. Now, I would share their details quite happily, but unfortunately, they are no longer taking on clients. They paid $2,000 for a bespoke financial plan. After the disaster of their previous quest to find advice, Tracey said that this financial planner put the calm balm on them. She said he was just so patient with both of them, and he took the time to learn and consider the completely different ways they both have of approaching things. It took a proper financial advisor to get them back on track, she said, and to this day, she pulls out his report and reads it, and each time she takes something slightly new from his advice. Now, he told them that they were mostly doing really well. Clearly, she had the ability to save and invest, but it was a little too all over the place. But if she refined a few things, she would be on the right track and could then begin to set and forget. He listened to both of them, she said. He understood how they both thought about money, and he offered suggestions about how they could proceed, and he provided them a flexible framework that it was entirely up to them to implement. Now, this type of financial advisor never touches your money. Instead, they show you options and they leave you to go and open accounts and invest your money. You are not handing your financial life off to someone else to manage, but are instead learning how to do it yourself. Tracey moved her $63,000 of KiwiSaver to the Simplicity Growth Fund, and she has since moved it to their High Growth Fund and has a current balance of $107,000 in KiwiSaver. She moved her SSRS superannuation from a moderate to a high growth fund. The balance is now about $70,000, and she will actually be able to access this soon when she turns 50. and at that point, she will move it into another of her investments outside of KiwiSaver. She sold an investment that she had started with InvestNow, and she moved it to a high-growth fund with investment provider Superlife instead. She also sold bonus bonds she had, Mercury shares, and also Air New Zealand shares. And this money all got added to her new Superlife fund. Plus, she also sold all the shares from her share club and she added them too. Her goal was to grow her Superlife investment to $300,000. Her husband also rejigged some of his investments during this time, but we didn't go into those details. Now, they then sold their student rental, plus created some term deposits for some short-term savings. These term deposits ended up being a bit of a mistake, she said, as she incorrectly thought her financial advisor had advised them to keep 18% of their total money in cash. She was incorrect here, and I only mention this to show that even with a plan in hand given to you from an advisor, well, you can still veer off course a little. But, as Tracey told me, no need to go anywhere in a straight line. Referring back to the report he gave her, it helped to see her error and correct it. She said that property has been her greatest financial flop because she has spent so much money and mental energy on it over the years, and the $40,000 she put into a coaching program was a massive waste of resources. There are just so many gambles, risks, and unknowns with owning property. You don't know if or that you will change your mind or want to move. You don't know how public policy will change or a change of government will financially impact your investment, and that public opinion is going to move to either be pro-property investors or against them. By the end of 2020, they had both individual and shared investments, but by now they both had more passive investments than they had before. They have a mix of individual and shared savings in the bank, growth and high-growth managed funds with Simplicity and Superlife, KiwiSaver and superannuation accounts. Their former home and flat were now a rental property, and they were living on a lifestyle property north of Te Whanganui-a-Tara, Wellington. Now, during our winding kōrero, I began to see a picture evolving of her not hesitating to buy and sell property when she needed to, and then feeling that same sense of comfort with doing the same with her share investments. And I've not really seen this before. Most people buy share investments, particularly ETFs and index funds, and are buy and hold investors. Time in the market is what they're going for, but not so much with Tracey. Tracey's journey has been one of many financial pivots, buying and selling multiple properties over the years, both individually and with her husband. Individually and collectively, they have tried a myriad of investments, only to build them up and then sell them off as they pivoted into the next thing. Now, I've hopefully managed to capture some of this in some semblance of order, and Tracey, I'm sure you'll let me know if I've failed. So, where are they today financially? And are they in the same house on the lifestyle property? No, they are not in the same house. They lived on the lifestyle property for 6 years and they really enjoyed it. But Tracey has been doing a lot of looking to the future, and she could see that managing a property was going to limit their ability to travel, and a thirst for extensive travel is growing for these two. They want to travel while they are fit enough and young enough to do it easily, so they made the decision to move towards the next phase of life with intentionality. In mid-2024, they right-sized their house by staying in the same region but moving into town and buying a smaller property that they can just lock up and leave when the time comes. The financial side of things had a bit of a twist though. They went looking at houses just to see what was available, and they promptly found the perfect house. The housing market had dropped and the house they wanted suddenly felt more affordable to them. But the timing was off because they had not yet sold their lifestyle property, but they really wanted this particular house. They negotiated a 3-month settlement period to give them a little time. Now with their lifestyle property on the market, they hoped for a quick sale. They needed to come up with just over $1 million, which was the asking price for their new town home, regardless of whether they managed to sell their lifestyle property or not. As with the other property they have together, they co-own it. Each owns a different percentage. So with this next property, they had to work out the percentage that each needed to contribute. and they each had to work out how to get that money together. At no time did they see the need for a mortgage. They wanted to pay cash, and I really like their commitment to this. They made what I consider to be a quite drastic move, but in reality it is completely in keeping with the way they've always been. And they cashed out their shared share market investments and their individual investments to each come up with the right amount of pūtea. So all those investments they'd created a few years back with the help of a financial advisor and that they had been studiously contributing to, they sold the majority of them off. Buying this most recent house, it really got them tightening their belts again, she said, and it took them back to their early and more frugal days, but it was a chance to reset, and they knew what to do this time, she said. She said they paid cash for the home, but they literally cashed up every single thing they could. Collectively, they contributed $300,000 of shared money. He had received a $300,000 inheritance, which helped him reach his contribution more easily, and both of them were cashing up everything they could, and all that money went into the deal. Now, it sounded like a game of Monopoly as you near the end, and the losing player is turning every single thing they have into cash to pay their bills. The alternative could have been to take out a mortgage for this new home while they waited for the old one to sell, but by paying cash, they knew their exact position, whereas entering into a mortgage, as is always the case with property, has a lot of unknowns. And I think she was right to be cautious by sticking to their wanting to pay cash guns. Although it was a bumpy ride to pay cash for their next property, she felt it was a huge achievement to do so. And then, 7 long months later, Tracey said she feels like they got really lucky and they finally managed to sell their lifestyle property. They bought it in 2018 for over $500,000, invested lots of money into it while they owned it, and they sold it 6 years later for $810,000. This cash showed up in their bank account in February of this year, 2025, and when we spoke, the share markets were trending well down due to the chaotic Trump presidency, and she was busy reinvesting her portion of the house sale back into the share market. It was an interesting time to be doing it, as she was debating with herself whether to chuck it all in as one lump sum or dollar cost average it in with smaller chunks. She chose the latter, only to invest tens of thousands of dollars one day and see the share market drop lower the next day. And she is really fortunate to have a lot of money to invest in a dropping share market, because that means when the recovery comes, which it will, those shares she bought cheaply will have bigger tax-free capital gains over time. Even though she knows this, it's still a little bit of a psychological torture act to push the buy button. Given their most recent property transactions, they are in the process of updating their wills so that they have mirror wills, plus they each have specific individual wishes that they want carried out upon their death. Keeping a current and legal will is such an important thing to do, particularly given they have a complex financial situation, which involves many assets, some debt, plus a business. For the person left to settle your estate, having a clear steer on your financial wishes makes life so much easier. I do wonder, though, how hard it would be to unravel the financial entanglement of their lives. So now they find themselves in the right house for them, which they own outright. This property also has a small unit on it that they have the potential to Airbnb once they do begin to travel, and that can provide income to pay their ongoing property expenses for them, she thought. They currently still own their house and attached flat in Wellington. It has a small mortgage on it, and their plan is to sell this property if and when the Wellington property market picks up again. Currently, they estimate that the value of this property has slumped $300,000 to $400,000 because Wellington is struggling, she said. How long they are prepared to wait, well, I do not know. Tracey is strategizing their move towards financial independence, working remotely from overseas, extensive travel, and work becoming totally optional. And this is where they have to make allowances for the different people that they are. They work together, but Tracey has chosen to pull back from working full-time, whereas her husband wants to continue with full-time work. They plan to continue to work the hours they each want to work, continue to invest, and take some amazing international trips. From their business, they each pay themselves depending on the hours that they put in, and she is currently paying herself a base salary of $72,000 annually. Plus, she'll give herself a bonus from time to time. He is paid more because he works more hours, and I suspect he's also going to give himself a bonus if money allowed. As of March of 2025, Tracey says that they have a combined family net worth, including property, of almost $3 million. But of importance to her is also her individual numbers. Her personal financial independence number is $1 million. That is the amount she is aiming to have in assets outside of her home, and reaching this number would mean she could draw a passive income from it annually. Currently, calculating her investments alone, including her portion of the Wellington rental property, plus her share market and retirement investments, her investments now total $750,000. She is 75% towards her goal of having $1 million invested in assets. If she were to include the house they live in, her net worth would be around $1.3 million. She is now investing in the Simplicity Unhedged Global Share Fund. He is also investing in this fund, and together they also have a joint investment in the same fund. And if I were to give Tracey $10,000 right now, what would she do with it? Well, she would invest it straight into this fund. And I suspect that once she gets access to her SSRS retirement savings on her 50th birthday, she will consider putting them here too. She also uses Kernel to invest in an S&P 500 fund and a global ESG fund, plus she has her KiwiSaver fund. In addition to this, she has cash in the bank for future travel and some house repairs. Now, as I tried to make sense of the timeline of her investing outside of the buying and selling of property, it made me think about the one piece of advice that her parents taught her about money, but what does she wish that they had taught her that she has since worked out for herself? Well, they always taught her to save, but they never taught her to invest. Saved money will just get spent somewhere down the line, but she wishes she knew that just by buying into a total world ETF at 17 years old and never ceasing would mean that she would be completely financially independent and work optional by now. Now, when I consider her current investment mix, she's not there yet, but she is closer than she has ever been to the pure simplicity of just investing in a total world ETF. She is still refining her investing mix. Tracey refers to her current financial position as being coast-fi, and this means that if she were to cease investing into these funds, they would compound and grow and get her to a financial independence goal of $1 million within probably the next 5 years. Her husband is also coast-fi, and it is a good feeling knowing that your financial future is secure, she said. But she is still working and is therefore still contributing to her investments as she and her husband continue to map out and plan their future. She said that they are working on answering the questions they each have about working remotely for 3 to 6 months at a time. Her husband still has some big career goals that he wants to hit, which is at odds with her nudging him to pull back from work a little to enjoy life with her more. She thinks they will both continue to work for a while, but less hours. With her freed up time, Tracey is taking on more charity work, something that she gets a lot of satisfaction out of doing. Plus, the two of them have some shared voluntary work that they also undertake in their community. There are plenty of people in the personal finance space who are setting good examples about how to take your work on the road with you. And if you want to work from Mexico or Spain or Thailand or wherever, but dreaming it and doing it are two different things. So they are dipping their toe in the water this year with a 6-week trip planned, and this is a decent length of time to be out on the road, both sightseeing and working a little, just to see how it goes. Plus, they have 2 big trips planned for 2026, one on their own and the other with extended whānau, which is something Tracey is really looking forward to. And these mini experiments will give her the information she needs to make bolder decisions about how to spend their time. Using her spreadsheeting skills, she is tracking the expenses of running their house and their lives, plus she is managing the rental property and looking into the potential of making Airbnb income while they travel too. While making money out of rental property takes work because it has so many moving parts, for every $100,000 she can add to her share funds, she is growing the passive income that she can pull off them at a later date. As a rule of thumb, for every $100,000 you can have invested in a total world ETF or a US 500 ETF type fund, you can sell off 4 to 5% and have your money last for the next 30 years. Just search the 4% rule on my blog, The Happy Saver, for more information. Now, during our long and very winding kōrero, we took a moment to cover off a few of the basics. And as for the main financial habits, the things that Tracey automatically does with money, she said that number 1, everything is automated as much as she can. All the bills are set up to be paid automatically. Number 2, she keeps an eye on expenses that are going on her credit card, and she pays the balance owing throughout the month. Number 3, when money hits her bank account, she splits it off into different sinking funds and buckets. Number 4, they spend about $200 a week on groceries for 2 of them and a cat. And number 5, another habit, is the research that she does and that she is not afraid to make changes to her investments. Even though she has reached out for help on a number of occasions, she said that it is important to do her own research and figure it out for herself. And she has learned that if something is being promised that feels too good to be true, it possibly is. Or if an investment is too hard to work out, you probably should find another route. I asked Tracey what the most extravagant thing was that she had purchased for herself in the last 90 days. And I asked this question because sometimes when people are on a journey to financial independence, they can get lost in their spreadsheets and forget that the point of money is to spend and enjoy some of it. But Tracey's doing perfectly okay on this front, and given she will turn 50 this year, she paid $275 for a lovely dress, and plus she bought the matching shoes. And finally, in regards to money, I asked her if there was anything keeping her awake at night. Nope, there is nothing keeping her from her sleep. And she said that is the privilege and the luxury that comes from spending the last 10 years investing in her financial knowledge and reaching the milestone of becoming Coast-Fi. She is so grateful she stumbled across the concept of financial independence. Now, there are also a few resources that she would recommend to you and I. The book Our Next Life by Tanya Hester, and Tanya is spelled Tanja. This book introduced Tracey to the idea of structuring money differently at different stages of life. My Investment Manifesto by Henrik Junevad, and I've probably said it terribly, but you spell it Jernevad. And the other one was Money Flamingo in their book Flamingo Fire, as they were the ones who made her realise that she was actually Coast-Fi and could already pull back her hours at work, giving her more time for volunteering. Now I'm almost at the end, but before I wrap up, I just have another quick message from today's sponsor. If your finances are holding you back from living the life you want, try PocketSmith out. They've got the tools to help you make money management easier. And have we got a deal for you? Happy Saver listeners get a whopping 50% off your first 2 months of PocketSmith's foundation plan. To get your deal, go to pocketsmith.com/The Happy Saver. That's pocketsmith.com/The Happy Saver. When I first started learning about how to invest in something other than housing in New Zealand, I too was grateful to stumble upon what was known as FIRE, or Financial Independence Retire Early. Mr. Money Mustache and J.L. Collins were my gateway into learning about ETF and index fund investing and the understanding that a big investment portfolio could provide a passive income for life. Since that time, the retire early part has all but been deleted, with many choosing to say that they have become financially independent and work optional instead. A whole new genre of different ways to financial independence have cropped up too, and Coast-Fi is just one of many. And what it means to Tracey and her husband is that they now have enough money invested that if she never added another cent, at 65 she would have met, and in her case far exceeded, the challenge she set herself, which is to have $1 million invested. Already they have given themselves the ability to reduce the amount of hours they work, because without the need to invest any more money, they don't need as much take-home pay. Tracey is already working less, and her husband is a work in progress. They continue to manage their money both together and apart, and you've heard me discuss many times that I often struggle to understand the complexity that people build into their financial lives when they have joint money and personal money. Now, perhaps it's because they met later in life. Perhaps it's because they both come from families whose parents ended up divorcing. Perhaps it's because they came into the relationship with differing amounts, or perhaps it's because they are both fiercely independent, or perhaps it's just habit. But to me, they appear to be running along a parallel track, and the complexity is perhaps a little unwarranted. And given these two are no strangers to completely reimagining their finances, who knows, they might be completely on the same team one day. What hearing about their example does for me, and hopefully for you, is show you the myriad of ways that money works in a relationship. And if it works for the couple who created it, then that is the perfect outcome. Everyone is different with the way they earn, spend, and invest, and I think what this couple has done is find a way to navigate these differences and create a plan that they both agree on. And I really appreciate Tracey taking the time to share her story with me. So ngā mihi nui, Tracey. And finally, I just wanted to end with a quick observation about financially independent people. They are an exceptionally generous bunch with their most precious asset, and that is their time. Tracey works less, so she earns less, but she uses that freed up time to help others in their community. And communities need volunteers like her and her husband who seem to have an innate sense of service to their community. Financial independence has so many benefits, and this is just one of them. So that is all from me this week, and if you want to get in touch, you know you can find me at my blog, thehappysaver.com. Thanks to all the people who send me such lovely emails telling me you like this podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. And please do share it with your friends. It is the best way that people can learn about the podcast, and I would love it if you would talk more about money with your own friends and whānau and help me continue to help others be better with money. So until next time, happy saving.